Sarah's mornings always started with silence, the heavy kind, not the peaceful kind. She lived in a tiny house in Portland, Oregon. From outside, everything looked perfect. But inside her heart, nothing felt right anymore. Every single day was the same. And that sameness was killing her spirit slowly. She stood in her kitchen one cool morning. The kettle was humming softly. Sunlight was falling across the counter. It looked warm and beautiful. But she felt nothing inside. Her husband, David, sat at the dining table. Same spot he'd been sitting for years. He was way older than her, and their lives didn't flow together anymore. He wasn't mean or anything, never yelled at her. Never hurt her. Never caused any drama. But he also never really saw her anymore. Never noticed the sadness behind her smile. Never felt the loneliness growing inside her every day. Sarah wondered if he even looked at her properly anymore. Or maybe she'd just become like the furniture, useful, familiar, but completely invisible. She made breakfast quietly, going through the same routine she knew too well. She put the plate in front of him. He gave her the same polite nod he always did. "Thank you," he said without looking up from his newspaper. His voice was calm, totally empty. No emotion, no connection. She stood there waiting, hoping for something more, something human. But nothing came. And that familiar ache came back, the one she tried pushing down every single day. Her life with David wasn't mean, just empty. They barely talked beyond basic stuff. "How was your day? Did you pay the bill? What's for dinner?" No laughter anymore. No warmth. No moments that made her feel like she mattered. She'd learned to hide her sadness behind a calm face, but the heaviness kept growing stronger every month. There was one part of her life that never felt empty though, her son, Jake. He was 17 years old. He had this quiet strength that amazed her. He noticed things other people missed. He saw when she felt overwhelmed. He could sense her sadness even when she hid it behind chores and small talk. Sometimes he'd look at her with worry, and that look alone made her hold herself together. He was the only person who still made her feel seen. That morning, Jake walked into the kitchen rubbing sleep from his eyes. He gave her a soft smile, the kind that warmed her heart instantly. "Morning, Mom," he said, and just that simple greeting made her breathe easier. He had this gentle way of speaking, a way that made her feel like she mattered. "How did you sleep?" he asked. Something about the sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. She didn't want him worrying. So she nodded and said fine. Even though she hadn't slept well in months, Jake glanced toward his father, then back at her. Like he could sense the tension she never spoke about. He stepped closer and squeezed her shoulder gently before grabbing his backpack. That small gesture made her feel grounded again. She didn't know how she'd survive the emotional emptiness of her marriage without her son's quiet presence. He was her anchor in a life that felt like it was drifting away. After dropping Jake at school, she drove to her job at a small bookstore downtown. The bookstore was her escape, a place where she could breathe without feeling judged or ignored. She loved organizing shelves, talking to customers, and losing herself in the soft music playing throughout the store. It was the only place where she felt like her real self, the version of herself she'd almost forgotten. But even there, her thoughts kept circling back to her life at home. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt appreciated, the last time someone asked her how she felt. Not what she did, not what she cooked, not what she needed to finish, but how she truly felt. Inside, her marriage had become a long conversation without emotion, a home without warmth. That morning at the bookstore counter, she caught herself thinking about the moment she'd watched David sip his coffee earlier. He looked so distant, so unaware that she even existed. It sparked a quiet fear inside her. She wondered if this was how the rest of her life would look. Days, repeating like a loop, her heart slowly shrinking until she couldn't feel anything anymore. On her drive home that evening, the question wouldn't leave her mind. Is this the life I'm meant to stay in? Is this all there is for me? She wasn't asking for grand romance or dramatic gestures. She simply wanted to feel understood, valued, and emotionally alive again. She wanted someone to see her, not just exist beside her. When she reached home, she saw Jake sitting on the porch, steps waiting for her. He looked up with concern the moment she stepped out of the car. His eyes softened like he already knew her heart was heavy. "Long day?" he asked. She tried to smile, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. Jake stood up and wrapped his arms around her in a simple warm hug. And as she leaned into him, she realized something powerful. She wasn't completely alone. Her marriage might feel lifeless, but her bond with her son was real, strong, and full of emotional truth. He was the one person who made her feel grounded. The one connection that kept her heart from closing completely. Deep inside her, a quiet truth was forming, something she could no longer ignore. Something inside her was about to change, and part of her was terrified. But another part felt ready. The rain had been falling since morning, tapping softly against the bookstore windows. As customers rushed in and out, Sarah didn't mind the rain. It made the store feel warmer, safer. Almost like a small world she could hide inside. She was busy arranging a table of new arrivals when she heard a voice behind her, a voice filled with surprise and a little disbelief. Sarah Martinez. She turned quickly, almost dropping a stack of books. Standing in front of her was Alex Thompson, a name she hadn't spoken or heard in nearly 20 years. He looked older, of course everyone did, but something about him was still exactly the same. His eyes held the same warmth, and his smile carried the same easy charm she remembered from her early 20s. She felt her breath catch for a moment. "Alex, is that really you?" He laughed softly. "I can't believe it. I walked in thinking I'd grab a book for the flight. And then there you were." Sarah's heart raced with an emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Not attraction, not anything improper, just surprise mixed with a strange, bittersweet happiness. Alex had been a close friend once, someone she trusted deeply, someone she used to talk with for hours when she was young and full of dreams. "What are you doing in Portland?" she asked. "At work trip." He replied, "I live in Seattle now. I'm only here for a couple of days." He paused, studying her face with gentle curiosity. "You look good, Sarah. Really good." She laughed, a natural, warm laugh she didn't even know her body remembered how to make. It felt freeing, like a piece of her old self had just slipped back into place. They stood there talking, catching up like 30 minutes were only 3 seconds. She told him about the bookstore, about Jake, and a little about life. He told her about his job, his travels, and the years that had shaped him. There was no flirting. No unspoken promise. No dangerous energy. It was just two people reconnecting after a long time, yet it stirred something tender inside her, a reminder of who she used to be before life became so heavy and quiet. Alex pointed to a novel on the front table. "We used to talk about this author. Remember, you always said their stories made you cry." "Still do," she admitted. "You haven't changed," he said softly. She felt something shift inside her chest at those words. She had changed so much that sometimes she couldn't recognize herself, but hearing him say it made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. They talked until his phone buzzed with a reminder. "My meeting." He sighed. "I have to go. But it was really good seeing you, Sarah." "You too," she said, meaning every word. Before leaving, he hesitated for a second. "Maybe I'll stop by again before I leave town." She nodded, and he gave her a warm smile before walking out into the rain. When the door closed behind him, Sarah felt a strange mix of joy and confusion swirling inside her. She tried to focus on stocking shelves again, but her mind kept drifting back to their conversation. It wasn't Alex himself that unsettled her. It was how alive she had felt while talking to him. How easy it had been to smile, how natural her laughter had sounded. That evening, when she walked into her house, the familiar heaviness greeted her instantly. David was in the living room watching television, the volume low, the room dim. He looked over with the same expression he always wore, calm, distant, tired, "You're home. Late," he said without emotion. "There was a rush at the store," she replied, though she wasn't really late. He nodded, eyes already drifting back to the screen. And just like that, the warm spark she'd felt earlier faded. The house felt cold again, the silence stretching long and thin between them. She changed clothes, made dinner, and moved through the evening like the shadow barely noticed. Barely spoken to. After dinner, as she washed the dishes, she thought of Alex's smile. The way he listened to her like her words meant something. It wasn't romantic longing. It was the longing to feel seen. Later that night, there was a soft knock on her bedroom door. Jake peeked and "Mom." She turned. Yes. He stepped inside, his face calm but observant. "You seem different today." "Happier, I think." Jake nodded, but didn't fully believe her. "You know you don't have to pretend with me." She sat on the edge of the bed and he sat beside her. Jake had always been her emotional mirror. He saw everything she tried to hide. "It was just someone I used to know," she finally said, keeping her voice steady. "Someone from a long time ago. Someone important." She hesitated. "Someone who reminded me of who I used to be." Jake didn't push. Instead, he put a hand on her arm. "I'm glad you smiled today, Mom. You don't smile enough." Her eyes softened. "I know." His presence alone steadied her heart. Jake was her strength, her comfort, the one person who kept her from completely breaking under the quiet pressure of her life. But as she lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, one thought stayed with her. Why did talking to Alex feel like breathing for the first time in years? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew this. Something inside her had started to wake up. Something she didn't understand. Something she wasn't ready to talk about. And she had no idea how much it would change everything. In the weeks that followed, the bookstore became more than just Sarah's workplace. It became the place where her heart slowly began to wake up. Alex kept his promise and returned. Sometimes he bought a book. Sometimes he just stopped by to talk. And sometimes he simply smiled at her from across the room. As if he understood her thoughts before she even spoke. Their conversation stayed respectful and gentle, never crossing lines. Yet something inside her shifted every time he appeared. He brought a different kind of energy into her life. He remembered small details she once told him. He asked questions that showed he cared. He listened, really listened. In a way she had almost forgotten people could. Sarah didn't seek romance. She didn't crave something forbidden. What she longed for was connection, human warmth, and Alex, without even trying, reminded her that such warmth still existed in the world. But with this new feeling came guilt. Not guilt for anything she did. She had done nothing wrong. But guilt for the emotions she could no longer deny. Sarah had never imagined her heart could feel alive around someone else while still being married. She carried the guilt quietly, like a weight she couldn't set down. One evening, she stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, while the sound of the television drifted from the living room. David sat in his usual chair, his eyes fixed on the news, his face expressionless. He had barely said more than a handful of words to her all day. The distance between them felt wider than it had ever been. And Sarah felt it pressing against her chest. She looked at him for a long moment. His hair had thinned more. His shoulders slumped slightly. He was aging in front of her. Yet he didn't seem aware of how much she had changed too. They lived side by side, but their hearts were miles apart. She wasn't angry at him. She wasn't resentful. She just felt invisible. As she dried her hands, a quiet voice came from behind her. Mom. She turned to see Jake standing in the doorway, his backpack still slung over his shoulder. His eyes were searching her face again, the same way he always did when he sensed something was wrong. "You okay?" he asked softly. She forced a small smile. "Just tired." But Jake stepped closer, studying her with the same quiet intuition he always had. No, it's more than that. Something inside her loosened. Her shoulders sagged. She didn't want to burden him, but she also couldn't pretend anymore. "I'm just confused," she whispered. Jake didn't move for a moment. Then he gently placed his hand on her arm. "Is it about Dad?" Sarah felt her throat tighten. She didn't want her son to see her sadness, but he already did. I feel alone, Jake, she admitted in a soft, trembling voice. Your father and we don't connect anymore. We don't talk, we don't understand each other, and I don't know how to fix it. Jake didn't speak right away. He looked down, then back at her with eyes full of quiet hurt. Not for himself, but for her. You've been carrying this alone, he said gently, for a long time. She nodded, tears forming, but not falling. He stepped closer and hugged her tightly. Not like a child needing comfort, but like a son who loved his mother deeply. You're not alone, Mom, he whispered. I'm here always. His words steadied her heart more than anything else could. Sarah held onto him, realizing how much he had grown, not just in age, but in emotional strength. He had become the one stable part of her life. The one person who made her feel understood without effort. Later that night, after Jake went to his room, Sarah sat on her bed thinking about everything: her marriage, her loneliness, the guilt she carried, and Alex's unexpected return. She wasn't looking for a new relationship. She wasn't trying to destroy her old one. She was simply a woman who felt lost and tired. A woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be emotionally alive. And then, just as she was drifting into thought, her phone buzzed. A simple text from Alex appeared. Are you all right? You seemed a little quiet today. Her heart fluttered. Not because of romance, because someone noticed. Someone cared enough to ask. She typed back a short message, keeping it simple and respectful. Just a long day. Thank you for checking. His reply came a moment later. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. She stared at her phone, conflicted. The kindness made her feel warm, but also uneasy. She didn't want to build an emotional bridge that could lead to something she didn't intend. Yet she also couldn't deny how comforting his words felt. Over the next week, she kept her distance, trying to sort through her emotions. But when Alex visited the bookstore again, he didn't push. He didn't ask personal questions. He didn't bring up their messages. Instead, he simply talked to her the way a friend would, softly, kindly, with genuine care. One afternoon, as they were talking, Alex paused mid-sentence and looked at her with gentle seriousness. Sarah, are you happy? Her breath caught. No one had asked her that in years. She didn't answer. She COULD single quotes T. Alex nodded gently as if he understood. I hope one day you will be, he said before leaving. His words echoed in her mind long after he walked out. That evening, as Sarah sat alone in her room, she realized her heart was caught between the life she had, the emptiness she felt, and the possibility of becoming someone stronger, someone who didn't live only in shadows. She didn't know what would happen next, but something inside her had changed, and she could no longer pretend she didn't feel it. The question Alex asked, "Are you happy?" did not leave Sarah's mind. It stayed with her during work, during dinner, during those long silent evenings, when David sat in front of the TV. While she wandered through the house like a quiet shadow, she tried to ignore the question, but it followed her like a whisper she couldn't escape. Days passed and the weight inside her chest grew heavier. She kept trying to be patient, kept trying to be the calm, steady wife she had always been. But something had changed inside her. She felt restless, like her heart wanted to breathe after years of holding everything. In one cold evening, she stepped outside onto the porch. The sky was dark blue, and the air carried the sharp smell of winter. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat down, hoping the cold would clear her thoughts. Instead, it made her loneliness feel sharper. She looked back at the house, the quiet rooms, the dim lights, the tired routine that had become her life. Nothing terrible had happened in her marriage. There were no fights, no cruelty. But there was also no warmth, no emotional closeness, no real partnership. She had grown into a different woman, and David had stayed exactly the same. They were no longer walking side by side. They were simply existing under the same roof. She didn't hear Jay come outside until he sat next to her. He didn't speak right away. He just leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching the dark street with her. After a moment, he turned his head. Mom, you look like you're carrying a whole world on your shoulders. Sarah let out a quiet breath. Maybe I am. Is it about Dad? Her throat tightened. Jake always saw straight through her. I don't want to hurt him, she murmured. He's a good man, but I feel alone. And I don't know how to make that stop. Jake looked at her with gentle sadness. Have you told him how you feel? She shook her head. I don't even know where to start. We don't talk. Not really. We live together, but we don't live with each other. Jake was silent for a long moment thinking. Then he said something that surprised her. You've spent years trying to keep everyone else comfortable. Maybe it's time to think about yourself. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She had never wanted her son to carry her pain. But his words didn't feel heavy. They felt honest. What if I make the wrong decision? She whispered. Then, you'll fix it, he said simply. But staying unhappy forever ain't a decision. It's a slow way of disappearing. His words hit her deeply. She had been disappearing bit by bit, year after year, into a quiet, colorless life. And she didn't want that anymore. Later that night, after Jake went to bed, Sarah sat alone in her room staring at the wall. She thought about her marriage, her responsibilities, her dreams, and the woman she used to be before life became so heavy and routine. She didn't want to destroy anything. She didn't want drama. She just wanted to feel whole again. And for the first time, she understood something clearly. She didn't need to leave her marriage. She didn't need to force a new beginning. She simply needed space to find herself again. The next morning, she woke early, heart racing with nervous courage. She walked into the living room where David sat at the table sipping his coffee. The moment he looked up at her, she felt her chest tighten. But she didn't back down. David, she said softly, I need to talk to you. He set his cup down, surprised. Of course. What's wrong? Sarah sat across from him, hands shaking slightly. I've been unhappy for a long time, she said carefully. Not because of something you did, but because we stopped being close. I don't feel connected to you anymore. David blinked in confusion. Sarah, I didn't know you felt that way. I know, she replied, because I never said it. I always tried to stay quiet and strong. But it's hurting me now, and I need space to understand what's happening inside me. He looked down at his hands. Are you saying you want to leave? No, she said instantly. I don't want to destroy anything. I just want to find myself again. I want to figure out how to feel alive, not stuck. I want time to think about us. And about me. David swallowed hard, clearly shaken. I didn't realize I was losing you. You're not losing me, she said gently. But something has to change for both of us. For the first time in years, David really listened. Not politely, not absent-mindedly, truly listened.